What's up everyone? Thank you very much for clicking on this video. The main focus of this video is going to be detailing a 6-week block of training culminating in a 200kg deadlift attempt. But before we get too deep into that, we should probably have a bit of a catch up, as this is my first YouTube upload in almost 3 years and quite a lot has happened since. Check it out.
So for those who don't know me, my name is Nathan and I was a gymnast for 25 years. Between 2011 and 2014, I competed for Birmingham University and then after graduating, went on to compete at senior national level until 2019. I continued training through lockdown and in 2022, I entered my final competition. I did my routines pretty much as well as I could have hoped for, got the gold medal and retired from gymnastics, happy in the knowledge that I had achieved pretty much everything that I reasonably could have done in the sport. The end. Except of course, it wasn't the end because life goes on. For the months that followed, I did pretty much no exercise at all. By the end of the year though, I was starting to get the itch to start training towards something new, and I started to plan out what my next set of goals could be. Towards the end of 2021, I did a one-off deadlift session just because I thought that it would be interesting to see how much weight I could pull off the floor with no specific training. I lifted 180 kilograms, and I remember thinking to myself then and there that a 200kg deadlift would be a cool thing to work towards once I was finished with gymnastics. And so, at the start of 2023, I began a focused phase of powerlifting training, but there was a problem. My starting point was now not even what it was when I tested my deadlift previously, because I was no longer supported by a good general base of training and conditioning through gymnastics. At this point, I was comfortably the most out of shape that I had ever been, and I would have a mountain to climb to even get back to where I was, let alone go beyond it towards my goal. I made some reasonable progress with my lifting throughout 2023, but so poor was my general condition and health at that point that I really struggled to train with the consistency and intensity that I wanted to. My best set of deadlifts towards the end of the year was 3 reps at 170kg, which I estimated would be equal to a roughly 190kg 1 rep max, but I never got around to testing it, so I'll never know for sure what I was actually capable of at that time. In 2024, I recognised that the way I was training and the way I was living was not conducive to health, happiness or proper progress, and so I made some changes. I stopped lifting weights and started running instead. I'm not naturally good at running, but I absolutely loved it, and I instantly felt the benefits that it brought me in terms of feeling healthier, losing weight and calming my mind. Despite really enjoying running and feeling great in myself, I was conscious that by only training cardio, I was losing a lot of strength which I had worked hard for over the years, and the obvious next step would be to try to rebuild a level of holistic, all-around capability which I hadn't felt since my gymnastics days. And so, at the start of 2025, I began hybrid training for the first time, training running and weightlifting concurrently. As I record this in July, I feel physically pretty similar to how I did as a gymnast, without needing to put myself through the excessive training hours and the high degree of risk that comes with gymnastics training, and I can see myself continuing to train like this for years to come. Initially, my return to weights training was focused on general hypertrophy to rebuild what I had lost throughout 2024, but after a few months, I felt physically ready to start doing heavy compound lifting again. And so in May of this year, I started deadlifting again for the first time in about 18 months. At the beginning of July, I tested my 1 rep max for the first time since that untrained attempt back in 2021. Not too sure what to expect due to the inconsistency of my deadlifting over the previous few years, but I was pleased to lift 187.5 kilograms, an all-time PB and a good step along the way to that elusive 200, which hopefully I will achieve in 6 weeks' time to finally box off that goal that I set myself all those years ago.
Okay, so now that you guys have a little bit more context in terms of where I'm at currently, I thought that I'd give a little bit of an overview of the program which I'll actually be following over this 6-week phase of training. It's worth mentioning that the list of exercises which you can see in front of you is not absolutely everything which I'll be doing during this block of training, because I'll still be maintaining my running and training some upper body during my weight sessions as well. But this is everything that I'll be doing that I feel is directly relevant to deadlifting. My approach to deadlifting during this phase will be to implement a high intensity, low volume approach. So I'll be deadlifting a maximum of 2 times a week, and I'll be keeping my total number of reps and sets really low, but making sure to work at a pretty high percentage of my 1 rep max to make sure that I'm allowing a good amount of recovery between each deadlifting session, and also to make sure that I'm really targeting that kind of high-end strength. For the first 3 weeks of the program, I'll be progressing my deadlift with a step loading approach. So I'll be doing most of my working sets at the same weight, but just gradually adding reps and sets. From week 4, I'll start to increase the working weight of my working sets. And then from week 5 onwards, that's when my total training volume will come right down. We'll keep the intensity high, but just start to taper things off and peak ready for that 1 rep max attempt at the end of week 6. So we'll go through the program week by week in a little bit more detail. I might not end up sticking to this 100%, but I'll certainly be following this program as closely as I can, and it should give a pretty good general idea of the strategy which I'll basically be following. So week 1 is an introduction week. Only 2 training sessions on week 1 and a total of 34 working sets which are directly relevant to deadlifting. I'm fresh off the back of a deload at the moment, so just kind of easing myself back in. So on the Tuesday of week 1, we'll be starting that step loading process at 2 sets of 2 at 170 kilograms. After I've done my deadlifts, I'll do accessories, including squats, quad isolation, hamstring isolation, and core. And then again on the Friday, pretty similar, a bit less accessory work and just adding an extra set of deadlifts at 170. Week 2 will increase up to 3 training sessions, but the same total amount of working sets. So it's not necessarily a heavier week, it's just spreading that volume out a little bit more evenly throughout the week. Working set reps for 170 kilo deadlifts is up to 3. A little bit less accessory work after the deadlifts because Wednesday's training session will only be accessory work. As I mentioned before, I will only be deadlifting 2 times a week throughout this process. So any weeks where I've got 3 training sessions listed, one of those sessions will be only relatively light accessory work. And then again on the Friday, adding a working set, building up to 3 sets of 3 deadlifts at 170. Week 3, increasing the total training volume slightly, up to 36 sets, but the layout of the week is pretty similar. So I'll be deadlifting heavy on Monday and Friday, increasing the reps at 170 kilos up to 2 sets of 4 and 3 sets of 4 respectively. And then Wednesday, accessories only, but just increasing the volume ever so slightly. As I mentioned before, from week 4, that's when I'll start to increase the weights for my working sets on deadlifts. So I've built up to 4 reps at 170 at this point, so we'll bring the reps back down to 2 sets of 2, but working with 180 kilos. A pretty heavy week of accessories on the Wednesday, and then adding an extra working set of 2 reps at 180 on the Friday. As I mentioned before, peak 4 is kind of the peak loading week. So from that point onwards, from week 5, we'll see the total training volume start to drop off. So week 5, we're back down to 2 training sessions only and a total of only 24 working sets. So on the Tuesday, it's 2 sets of 3 deadlifts at 180, followed by some key accessories. And then on Friday, increasing the weight a little bit further still to do 2 sets of 2 at 185. Going into the final week, really peaking and tapering things off. Again, only 2 training sessions, this time a Monday and a Friday instead of a Tuesday and a Friday, just to give myself that extra day to recover between the last heavy session and the actual test. So on Monday, I will only do a top single of deadlift, and that will be aiming to hit 190 kilograms, which will be a 1 rep max PB if I manage to do it, but hopefully at that point I'll feel that I have even more in the tank, which I can save for later on in the week. A little bit of accessory work, but really not much, trying to keep the total training volume really nice and low at this point, and then a good few days of rest, ready to test my maximum deadlift at the end of that week on the Friday. If I don't quite make the 200, I'll work down from there and see what my 1 rep max is, hopefully as close to 200 as possible. If I do hit the 200, then I'll build up from there and see how much further I can go. So it should be exciting. I'm interested to see how much I can lift in a few weeks' time. For the rest of this video, I'll just put in a few little clips from these training sessions to give you an idea of how those training sessions went, and then we'll catch up in a little bit more detail ahead of that final testing session. Okay guys, so somewhat frustratingly and unexpectedly, I'm going to have to end the video here. I was out hiking yesterday and I rolled my ankle pretty badly. It's pretty swollen, bruised, and weight bearing at the moment is fairly painful, so obviously I'm not going to be able to do any kind of meaningful weightlifting for the next few weeks, and so that does put an end to this 6-week process. At some point in the hopefully not too distant future, when I'm recovered, I will endeavour to rebuild my strength and get myself back up to the point that I am now, and then I will make a part 2 to this video, which will hopefully detail me finally working my way up to and hitting that 200k deadlift. As frustrating as this situation is, I do still have lots of positives to take from the past 4 weeks of training. Hitting 170 kilos for 4 reps for the first time and hitting 180 kilos for 2 reps for the first time. That last weight session that I did on Friday, where I hit 2 sets of 2 on 180 for RPE 8, was really exciting because I was feeling really strong, and I have no doubt in my mind that had I managed to avoid this injury, I would have been well on the way to that 200k lift based on how those lifts were feeling on Friday. But yeah, wasn't to be this time round. Keep an eye out for part 2, and we'll continue the journey there.